guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I'm going to be getting into my February wrap-up, telling you all about every single book that I read last month. In February I read a total of 13 books, and I had kind of like an even mix of things that were like and things that were really good. I have so many 5-star reads this month, which I cannot wait to yap about. So let's not delay it any further. Let's get into it. We're gonna do it like we always do, starting off with stats at the top. As I mentioned, I read 13 books, and that was a total of 4,438 pages. And here is my mood breakdown. Pretty straightforward like it usually is. Dark, tense, mysterious. I will say there are less colors than usual on my little pie graph, so apparently I was like sticking to the same stuff all month. I also had an almost even mix of fast-paced and medium-paced books in February. There were no slow-paced books in there, and I did read one book that was over 500 pages and two that were under 300 pages, but most of them were in that sweet spot, the 300 to 500 page range. I read all fiction in the month of February, and here is my genre breakdown. Kind of surprising. There's very little horror that I read in February. It was mostly thrillers, followed by romance and fantasy. Across the 13 reviews that I made for the books that I read last month, I had an average rating of 3.92, a couple 2 stars, a 3 star, a 3.5 star, 4 4-stars, a 4.5 star, and 4 5-star reads. And this is the breakdown of how I read those pages throughout the month. You can see the spikes when I was filming vlogs or reading a book that I was obsessed with. The big spike at the very beginning was a 24-hour readathon in which I read over 1,000 pages in a day. That was crazy. If you missed that vlog, I read some really good things and some not really good things in that 24-hour readathon. I will link the vlog up above and down below. And just as a reminder, I do host 2 24-hour readathons, a month-long readathon and a week-long readathon every single year. One of those readathons happens every quarter, and I do that over on Patreon. The next one that we have coming up is actually the month-long readathon, and it is based around thrillers. I host it in April, and it is called the Spring Thrills Readathon. So if you want to join in on that, or if you participated last year and you want to participate again, as always, my Patreon is linked down below. So now let's get into my actual book reviews, the actual 13 books that I read last month. As always, we're going to start out at my lowest rated book and work our way up to my highest rated book. I know I got some comments. Some people would rather me go over the books in the order in which I read them, but I just feel like I like doing it this way better, because if I'm being honest, I overlap books sometimes. I don't remember the order in which I read them. The timeline that I log books on Storygraph is not accurate because I often forget to log my book and review it right after I read it. Also, I like to let books marinate on my brain. Sometimes I change ratings in a few days after I read a book. So yeah, for that reason, we're gonna continue doing it this way. I also like getting the dragging out of the way really quick for the people who don't want to hear like the negativity, and then just raving about my faves of the month. We will start out with my 2 2-star reads. Both of these are thrillers that I think you guys can totally skip. The first one is A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, which was a pretty big disappointment for me because I've really enjoyed Kate Alice Marshall in the past, but this one just didn't hit. It sounded like it was going to be the snowy version of the tropical good for her movie Blink Twice, and I loved that movie. It's directed by Zoe Kravitz, and it was giving me all the vibes, so I was highly anticipating that kind of plot in this book, where a woman is going to a snowy, isolated, like rich mansion estate with her new fiance to kind of get ingratiated with his family. But while she's there, she gets these anonymous messages telling her that her fiance is a bad person, and she finds a photograph of her younger self at their like beautiful chalet resort, and she's like, wait, have I been here before? What are the chances of that? What more sinister thing is going on underneath the surface? And while I like the setup to this book, I just think that it was not plotted out very well. There were a lot of plot holes. There was a lot of and thenning instead of nicely done twists and turns within the plot. None of the motivations for the twists or the characters' decisions make sense. It was just kind of a confused smorgasbord of decisions that characters who I didn't really care about were making. The overall message wasn't anything that was too deep. I didn't find any depth to many of the characters, so I just didn't get anything out of a thriller. I can do a thriller that is not deep, but for that, you know, I have to be invested in the plot and the twists. And when the plotting fails, I really just feel like a thriller is a nothing burger. So I would say you can skip this one. I gave it 2 stars. Next up, we have This Girl's a Killer by Emma C. Wells. I put this one in my new release thriller vlog from last month. If you missed it, I will link it up above and down below because I know y'all really like my thriller vlogs. I make one every single month and y'all just love them, and I'm so happy you do because I love making them. However, I did not love reading this book. We are following basically like a female Dexter in this book. She's a female serial killer and she takes out the people around her, but someone is hot on her tail and her murders keep getting publicity, like on TV, the police are onto her, etc, etc. So we are trying to follow along with her and make sure that she doesn't get caught. But honestly, this main character was so insufferable. I was rooting for her to get caught the whole time. I was in such a weird place reading this book because unlike A Killing Cold, I was actually intrigued in this plot and I thought it was plotted out really well. Like, it was done really great, but the character was insufferable. And a lot of the things that she was saying, I just diametrically disagree with. I think she lacks all self-awareness. She is not self-possessed in any sense of the word. She needs to go to a lot of therapy. I just was not on her page at all. She read very similar to a very unlikable character that I've read from before, and that was the main character of actually a contemporary romance called Cheat Day. That character just lacked any and all insight, took zero responsibility, zero accountability for anything, and just thought she was right the entire time. And when someone is so clearly wrong, but they're just digging their heels in the dirt, claiming that they're right, and everyone around them enables them, that is something that just boils my blood. Like, we are all imperfect people. We all have to take responsibility at some point, and I can't get on board with a character who doesn't do that. Y'all know I love an unlikable, like, femme fatale, murderous woman, but not this one. She was giving pick me, and she needs to go to therapy. And I said what I said. Next up, I did have a 3-star book this month as well, and that is a fantasy romance sequel. This is the second book in the Nightborn duology, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. And we are following in this book the continuation of the first book and the couple that comes up in there. I just thought that this one dragged a lot. Like, the middle 300 pages could have been condensed into half the amount of pages, I swear. It felt kind of aimless a lot of the time, and quite a few people that I follow on Storygraph ended up DNFing this. I see why my friends did that because I didn't end up getting a lot out of it. I wanted to kind of feel some completion to the plot, and I will say the last like 75 pages of this book were really, really good. However, I just don't think it was worth the time investment because I didn't get a lot out of the majority of the book. It just kind of felt stilted, like we were hanging on to something from the first book that I didn't really care about. I will get into more in-depth thoughts on this series though when I talk about the first book and the middle novella, which will come later in the wrap-up. I also read a 3.5-star book in February, and that was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And I'm kind of conflicted on this book, as you can tell by my rating. I feel like a 3.5-star rating is something that I give to a book that I enjoy, but not enough to give it a solid 4-star, like I would recommend this to anyone kind of blanket rating. There are just things that take away from that. And in this book, it was the way that Ali Hazelwood developed the romance and the way that she wrote her main characters. And I feel like I continually over and over and over have this critique for Ellie Hazelwood, so I probably will stop picking up her books at this point. I absolutely loved The Love Hypothesis. Nothing else will hit for me like that. It was a 5-star book. I was obsessed. I have a dedicated reading vlog for that book, which is vintage at this point and probably really embarrassing. So actually I'm not gonna link it because nobody watched that. But ever since that debut, I just haven't had something from her that I really connected with the characters emotionally. I did like the fantasy elements of this book though. We are following a vampire woman and a werewolf man that enter an arranged marriage to kind of unite the werewolves and the vampires. But through this arranged situation, they are falling in real love. And they're also having this like side plot thing of basically like saving their societies. And I really did like the political side and the fantasy plot a lot more than the romance plot, which is really rare for me and I think speaks to the slowness of the slow burn in this book. I'm not really a slow burn romance enjoyer. I am not gonna lie, I'm kind of an insta-love person. Like I like when we are in and we are in the relationship. The tension building in this book just happened way too long, way too stretched out. If you like a slow burn, I would recommend this to you 100,000,000%. But for me, there were just those couple of factors that made it not a favorite. I don't think it's a bad book though. I did enjoy my reading experience of it. Next up, let's get into my 4-star books. Now that we're into my 4 stars, I would kind of just recommend these to everybody. A 4-star and above is like, this was a great time. I don't have any major complaints. The first 4-star we will get into is Everybody is a Liar by Liv Constantine. And this is a super short, I'm pretty sure audio only thriller by a couple of my favorite authors. I love Liv Constantine. And this is exactly what it sounds like. Just a short, sweet, twisty domestic thriller where every single person is a liar and morally gray and a terrible person. We're following a therapist who begins to suspect that some of her clients know each other. She is so unethical and she gets wrapped up in the scandal and the murder of it all. The title is so true. Everyone is a liar, including the therapist. Like everyone is crazy. If you want just messy domestic drama and super fun twist with pretty low stakes and a very quick reading time, you will love Everybody is a Liar. Next up, I also gave 4 stars to Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is the first book in the Nightborn duology, the first book to the Ashes and the Star-Cursed King book that I gave 3 stars earlier. I think the first book in the duology is much, much more solid. I really enjoyed this one. It is enemies to lovers romantasy following a competition called the Kajari. And the people who compete in the Kajari are trying to be the last one standing who will get a wish granted by their goddess Nyaxia. There are 3 different realms of vampires within this world: the Nightborn vampires, the Shadowborn vampires, and the Bloodborn vampires. And we are following a Nightborn vampire as well as a human daughter of the Nightborn king. They are enemies within the competition. Obviously, one of them has to die for the other one to win, but over the course of training and alliances, etc., they form a very unique bond together, and it was really fun. I really liked the romance in here. I liked the competition aspect. I love a kind of competition structure to a romantasy. It just feels like the flow of the book goes so much better, especially when you compare it to the sequel, which dragged so heavily. The competition aspect of this book really kept the pace going, and the end of this book was shocking and crazy. I absolutely loved it. It's not an all-time favorite romantasy, but it was a really good time. Also, magic system and world building in that book was just so easy to grasp. I would say if you're getting into romantasy, that would be a great one to start with because it's just easy reading. You automatically get what's going on. There's no intricate stuff to keep track of. It's just fun. Next up, I have another 4-star thriller, and that is The Best Lies by David Ellis. Honestly, I did not know if I was gonna like this book. It follows a lawyer, and he's like this weirdo defense attorney who's a pathological liar, and he gets caught up with a mobster because of the mob boss is like found dead, and his blood and fingerprints are on the gun, and the FBI is like, do you want to work with us? But also like, you're a liar, so should we work with you? I am not into all of that, like crime, procedural, lawyers and investigators and mobsters. Like, I'm just usually not into that. I like a more domestic thriller or something like for the girls, something feminist. I don't want to follow these like crooked male characters. However, I was really caught off guard how intriguing this book was. It reads like an action movie, and I could not put it down. It was so good. The voice of our main character is so easy to follow, and the chapters are so short that I just found myself flipping and flipping and flipping pages, not wanting to put it down for a second. The twist at the end blew me away. It was just such a fast read and a surprisingly good time. I know that I will continue to pick up David Ellis thrillers because even though they don't have much to say, they're just such a good time, such a gratifying read. I feel like when I finish one, I'm just happy and satisfied, and I get the feeling that I want from a thriller. And the last 4-star read I have to recommend to you guys is Tiny Threads by Lilium Rivera. And this is a super interesting book. It reminds me a lot of the movie Last Night in Soho. I freaking love that movie. And this is about an aspiring fashion girly pop who is kind of like working her way up the ranks. She has a little bit of a chip on her shoulder because of her upbringing. She's Puerto Rican, and she grew up in not the most prosperous circumstances. She has this idea of her parents being immigrants and her having to work herself up and kind of pleasing her family while also trying to make a life for herself. And she thinks that she gets her big break. She moves out to California to work for this very prestigious fashion house. But when she's there, odd things start happening. Her house seems haunted. She's hearing voices. She's losing time. People seem to randomly not like her at her company. Things are happening on her job that she's like, oh my God, you guys, like this happened. And everyone's like, no, it didn't. Like, her life becomes basically her being gaslit by the circumstances around her, all as she's trying to overcome not only her barriers at work, but her personal demons. And along the way, she's uncovering the dark truths around the fashion industry, different ideas about her identity as a woman and as a Puerto Rican, as a child of immigrants. There's so much rich commentary in here, and the horror elements are genuinely creepy. I loved this setting. I'm really enjoying California settings right now. It just feels like it's getting me in the mood for spring and summer reading. I don't know if it's because like every other year for the past few years, I have gone out to visit friends in California, and it just makes me want to take a trip. It makes me miss those friends. I love the setting. Even though it was like gritty and horror-esque in here, I just love it. I ate it up. And I haven't heard anyone really talk about this book. If it sounds like anything you'd be interested in, highly recommend it. Next up, I do have a 4.5 out of 5-star read, one that was just so close to being a 5-star and barely missed it. And honestly, I've gone back and forth if I want to give this book 5 stars or 4.5, and there's just one glaring plot hole that holds me back from giving it that 5-star rating. But I love this book so much, and I highly recommend it. And that was my Pretty Girl Book Club pick for the month of February, which was Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. In this book, we are following a guy whose wife goes missing while he's on the phone with her. Okay, he's calling her, she's driving home from work, it's rainy, she stops on this desolate road to help a stranger in distress, and suddenly she's no longer on the other end of the line. When he goes to try to find her, she's nowhere to be found. Now, a year later, he is wallowing in his grief. He's not getting any writing done, and his agent tells him, you know what, you should just go stay on this remote Scottish island island, try to get some space for your grief, try to write your next book. And when he does that, he believes that he sees his dead wife on the island. So we are trying to figure out what happened to her, if she's back, or if this man is just simply going crazy. There's also some creepy shit happening on this island. I loved the isolated setting. I loved the eeriness of it. The atmosphere is great. There are so many clever things done in here, character-wise and plot-wise. I just think it's a masterfully done, so twisty and intriguing thriller. This is another one with the short little chapters that I just couldn't put down. But there are just a couple, there's really one major, but two glaring plot holes. I think the reveals and the twists kind of make the plot holes worth it because it is so shocking, but I just can't give it 5 stars because I can't get past those couple plot holes. But beyond just the twists and the reading experience of this book, which is exactly what I want from a thriller, I also really liked the conversations that were started in this book. And the thing is that one of the plot holes kind of makes the commentary that I liked moot. I can't really explain it without getting into spoilers, but if you're interested, we went into it full in depth with spoilers on my Patreon live show when we discussed this book in my book club, so I will link that down below if you are interested in the spoilers. Regardless though, I really recommend this book. I think Alice Feeney is low-key slaying, and she just said, you know what, y'all are gonna have to deal with the plot holes because this story is gonna be worth it, and I agree. And now finally we are into my 5-star reads. I had 4 of them. They're all pretty much new faves. They're in very different genres, all of them, so let's get into it. The first one is the middle novella in the Nightborn duology, and that is 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. I love this book. I love it more than the duology, okay? This little novella did more for my romantasy loving heart than 1,000 pages of the rest of the series. If you like short and sweet romantasy with good smut, good relationship building, good little plot points on the side that are dealing with the world and the fantasy of it all, you will love this book. We are following a girl named Lilith, and she's a human, but she comes from a town where this disease is like ravaging the land, and she does some very specific scientific research involving vampire blood to try to figure out if she can find a cure for the disease that is killing everyone around her. She ends up getting into something with a local vampire who's very dark, very brooding, very sexy. And she makes a deal with him that she can use his blood to test on and do her little experiments in exchange for giving him roses. And oh my god, the way that the relationship develops, and also the way that they like intellectually play off each other, and that kind of like fantasy plot is so well ingrained with the development of their romance. I loved it so much. They're so cute. The smut is so good. I have no complaints about this book at all. I was absolutely obsessed with it. This is the jewel of the Nightborn duology for me. And I want to really continue the Crowns of Nyaxia series since there are 2 more duologies and see if we see more from these characters, because I really hope, I'm crossing all my fingers and toes that we will. I love this couple so much. Next up, we have a thriller, probably my favorite thriller that I've read in 2025 so far, and that is Kill Yours, Kill Mine by Catherine Kvasik. Oh my goodness, this is such a good thriller. I just knew from the plot synopsis on the back of the book that I was gonna love it, but I did not know that I was gonna love it as much as I did. Like, the execution was flawless. We are following Mia, who is a grief counselor, and she gets together this group of women under the guise of group grief therapy because every single woman in the group has lost their sister to domestic violence. But it's not really a grief counseling group. They're actually assigning each other the murders of the partners who killed their sisters. So they sit down in this room and they're like, I'll do yours, I'll do yours, I'll do yours, I'll do yours, to avenge all of their sisters. We go through all of the murders. It will have you on the edge of your seat. Things feel like they're gonna go wrong at every turn. It is so suspenseful and so twisty. And of course it has that little feminist arc in there that I love so much. perfect ending, good for her vibes. No complaints, no notes. This is what I want when I request a good for her thriller. Also, y'all know me, I love to read about an unethical therapist. Like, I am endlessly entertained by that because in my job, like, I'm a therapist and everything is ethical by the book, and it's just kind of fun to read about someone doing it all wrong. Next up, we have The Favorites by Lane Fargo, and this is not really a historical fiction, but we definitely spend a lot of time in this book in the 90s and early 2000s. It has those vibes, so it's not a contemporary, but it's a story of these two Olympians, okay? And they are ice dancing partners. They start out platonic as friends, and then it turns into something more, and then it all crashes and burns, and it happens on national television in front of all of America and really in front of the whole world because it happens at the Olympics. It is the scandalous Olympic romance that we need. It is a character study on both of these people and everyone around them. It talks about the culture of the Olympics and of competitive skating, and it just goes into such complex relationship dynamics while keeping it like so intriguing and filled with drama and scandal that I was hooked the entire way through. It reminds me so much of the movie Challengers, which was one of my favorites of last year. It also gives me the vibes of I, Tonya, and Carrie Soto is back. It's just like how a sport can mirror relationships, and I love that metaphor. It's so interesting. This book was scandal and emotion all the way through. I was on the edge of my seat. I was so invested. I felt like I was watching a reality show. Oh, and that's the other thing. It's like told in the style of a documentary. I think that's the piece that reminded me so much of I, Tonya, is that it's like talking about the scandal in retrospect, right? So it's like 20 years later, the full story and all the details that weren't leaked to the press are finally being told. It just makes you feel like you're immersed in this world. Very, very similar to the structure of Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I think everyone knows is one of my favorite books of all time. All of these comparisons, which are 5 stars for me, like you can tell how much of a 5-star favorite this book is. It's just so aligned with my taste, but I really think anyone's gonna love this book. Like anyone can get into this. We all love the Olympics. We all love drama and scandal. We all love the emotion of it all. So get ready to laugh, cry, feel invested the entirety of this book. And it's pretty long, but it did not feel long when I read it. It was so, so good. And I know you're thinking, oh my God, she's raving about The Favorites. How could there possibly be a book that she liked more than that? Well, my crown jewel of my 5-star reads in February is Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn. Oh my God, this book, from the setting to the characters to the LGBT rep to the dry, sarcastic voice to the character-driven, kind of like plotless, but you know exactly where it's going. It's like everything was perfect. I would not change a damn thing about this book. I was highlighting down boots. I literally could not get enough. It follows this writer, and she has gotten canceled because of something that she said on the internet, and she's still trying to hold on to this fledgling career while not fucking it up further and trying to figure out more about her own personal identity as well as how she shows up in relationships, because she ends up falling in love with a fellow writer in a Zoom writers group. It is the most sarcastic, sapphic book I've ever read in my life. Like, it felt like all of my friends got together and our collective consciousness wrote this book. Like, it is so fucking real. This is genuinely what it feels like to be a zillennial in a queer space. Like, this is what it is being a creative queer woman. And it goes into so much, like I couldn't even begin to talk about everything in this book. The relationships, the characters, the setting in LA, it's dreamy, it's perfect, it's dark, it's funny. I mean, this is gonna be one of my best books of the year. I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with Anna Dorn. As soon as I read this book, I ordered her entire backlist. I will definitely be reading them steadily over the next few months, starting out with a thriller, which I'm literally about to start reading in my new release thriller vlog for March, which is written by the main character of this book. So Anna Dorn wrote this thriller from the perspective of her writer main character in Perfume and Pain. I just love the way the universe is expanding. I love that it's a revolution. I love Astrid Dahl. I love this book. If you're gonna take one recommendation from me, let it be this. Character driven, good for her, sapphic girls. This is our time. And with that beautiful masterpiece, that is gonna wrap it up for my February wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about all 13 of the books that I read last month. I hope you got a few good recs from this video. If you did, go ahead and give this video a like. If you liked it, like it, you know what I mean? And also, so you don't miss out on any future reading vlogs or my March wrap up, because I'm reading so many things this month already that are so good. You should subscribe to my channel. And of course, I gotta remind you to go to therapy and read a book this week. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!